The lake behind me is home to the biggest fully scaled mirror carp in the whole of the UK. Last caught over 60 pounds by my good friend Lee Morris. I have just spent 72 hours trying to track down the Lord of the Manor. Follow me now as I go in pursuit of the largest. You may have seen earlier this year Fox consultant Lee Morris was all over social media and the angling press with his historic capture of a 60-pound English fully scaled mirror. The biggest fully scaled in this country and potentially one of the biggest in the whole of the world. It's a fish that I dearly wanted to catch when I saw pictures of it for the first time at 59 pounds from late last year. And I'd already booked myself a trip, but Lee got here first. I arrived yesterday and set about walking around and trying to find the fish, the big fish, the Lord as it's known. Having watched the water for a few hours, quite a lot of fish were jumping, but they were small fish and they were condensed in the same area. As we're here to make a film, we've got permission from the owner to fly a drone. And of course, when you've got the ability to put a drone up, you're going to use it for watercraft as well. And we were really keen to put the drone over the area where the fish were jumping. It was soon apparent it didn't look like the big fully scaled was in amongst those fish. There was a lot of fish there, but they were pretty small. Away from the main pack, we noticed one fish swimming on its own, and it looked really big. And I, for a minute, thought it could have been the big fully scaled. But having studied pictures of some of the other fish in the lake now through the album and on social media, it's clear that that fish was one called the pig, one of the other A-team in the lake. And that got us excited, you know, to see a big fish like that, and kind of fueled the adrenaline a bit for getting the rods out. So yesterday evening I made the decision, rather than fish where the bulk of the fish were, I haven't travelled all the way to Hampshire to get bites. I've come here for one fish, that big fully. So I've set up away from the bulk of the fish in the area where I saw the pig, hoping that the fully scaled is a bit of a loner, because to get to 60 pound at 12, 13 years old, I fancy it likes its food and doesn't want to share it with a lot of fish. So I'm hoping it's a loner, and I've gone away from the pack. Got the rods out, like I say, just on dark. Nothing happened so far. I've seen some fizzing just down to my left this morning, so I've repositioned a rod close in on some fizz. So we'll see if anything comes from that. But for now, I'm just going to carry on watching the water like a hawk and just trying to see any signs of this fully scaled. I'm here for that one fish, and I'm going to try my damnedest to catch it. Well, the rod that I placed on the fizzers has just rattled off. First bite from the Manor, and when you know there's a 60 pound fully scaled, my knees are going. It doesn't feel that heavy, so I think it's probably unlikely that my first bite out of it is going to be the target, but you can't expect to be that lucky. Oh man, what a buzz. Rod's been out no more than 25 minutes, half an hour. Goes to show I was up 4:30 this morning, pacing up and down the banks looking for any sign. First Manor Carp in the net. Well, that is why I like the hinge stiff rig so much. Look at that. The whole chod section inside the fish's mouth, just the swivel sticking out. That is nailed. It might not be the 60 pound fully, but if I'd had a hook hold like that and it was a 60 pound fully, I'd be very happy. Right. I need to get some forceps on that. Is so far back unbelievable. It really wanted that pop up. Happy days. Well, I think that's what they call perfection in miniature. Not the £60 fully scaled, but my first bite and a lovely fish. And can you imagine, out there is a fish swimming around that's probably about 50 pounds bigger than this. Absolute buzz fishing here. Really happy to get the first bite. Shows that the tactics are working. If they can catch this fish, they can catch that big one, I'm sure. Get it back, get some breakfast myself. Come on, little man. Come tell that big fully. Come and pay me a visit. So, a little bit of excitement at the moment. I've just seen a really big fish shuffle out, not a full crash, but it shuffled out and it moved a lot of water. Whether it was the big fully, I couldn't say for sure, but it was definitely a big fish. It definitely is worth getting a rod in that area. It's in a very similar area to where one of the locals who came around earlier on told me about. He said there was a spot about 60 yards, 16 wraps, towards a certain tree over the far side there, and the fish is showing probably 10 yards away from that. So I'm going to just have a little lead around now at about that 60 yard range, 60, 70 yard, and see if I can find this spot or a spot near that fish, and then I'm going to put a rod on that tonight for sure. See if we can find it. Oh, that went down hard. Definitely harder. Let's have a look. The float will come up. I think the float's coming up, yeah. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 11 foot. Nice. Now, you'll see on my marker float setup, I have no boom. I have literally the lead attached to one of the Edges run rig systems, and that's it. If you have a boom, the float can pop up. It could be sitting over low-lying weed. I know if I can get a float to pop up on the bottom's clear enough to present a rig. Certainly the hinge stiff rig, which is my go-to rig. And no weed around the float or the lead. I'll have another couple of chucks and then get it clipped up, wrap it up, and get one of the fishing rods wrapped up and get it out there and a bit of bait out, I reckon. So, time for the evening update. Nothing's happened on the fish front. However, I've now got my rods out. They've gone out a lot nicer than they did yesterday. Yesterday evening was a rush, first day at the lake. I'd watched the water for a long time before deciding where to fish, and then everything was a rush. So I don't feel like I fished at 100% last night. This morning I got my act together, reacted to some fizzing, caught a fish, and I felt like I was actually angling. The rest of the day has been quiet, but I have seen a big fish show out to the right of the swim where I'm fishing. And having spoken to one of the local lads who bailiffs here, he said there was a good area out there. I found a nice spot, 15.5 wraps. I've got the rod out there now, and I have had a fish show very close to it since the rod's been out as well. So I feel confident for that tonight. My final rod, I decided to find a new spot in much shallower water. So that's gone out and a little gap just up to the right of my swim, and that's fishing in 4 feet of water, so much shallower. than what I have been fishing. My middle rod is in 11 foot and my left hand rod's in 7 foot, so I'm covering all bases. And yeah, hopefully I get some more bites. Even more hopefully it's that big fully scaled, but you know, we'll see how we go. Plan is to do the night here now and then fish out until about 8 or 9 tomorrow morning, and if nothing's happening, I'm going to be on my toes, and I'm probably going to fish around the other side where there's lots of overhanging trees and some really sexy looking margin spots. And I think the final 24 hours of the session will be fished under the tips, close in, because the big one has got some form for doing close in captures, and I would have given it, you know, 48 hours in the open water areas with no joy by then. But let's not count ourselves out yet. I feel really confident that that big one or a big one might turn up by tomorrow morning, so we'll see. Ooh. 21-3. Happy days. Well, fish number 2 and my first Manor mirror. 21 pound. Really strange take, literally just 3 bleeps. Looked, the bobbin was up tight, the rod had bent round and it was solid in weed straight away, so donned the life jacket, jumped in the boat, and after a pretty fast and furious battle out in the boat, got the net under him, and yeah, really happy with that. That's on the shallow rod that I placed in the last hour of light this evening, and it's gone within a couple of hours, 2 or 3 hours I think. 4 foot of water, happy days. I've just had a steamer of a bite from a very, very powerful fish, and because of what's in here, I'm going to struggle to talk to the camera. This fish is trying to do me down the margin. The water level's so high at the minute that the reeds have got a really good depth of water around them, and these fish know exactly where to go. There's some fish in here with like massive tails that do ruck. In you go. Yes. Fish number 3. Great way to start the day. Angry fish. Pulled my arm off. That's left me in a little bit of a quandary because I was just sitting there eating my breakfast, planning to pack everything up and move over the other side to the gates rim because I heard some sizable fish showing close to the margins last night. And I do think for the last 24 hours, having rods literally under my tips, under the overhanging trees, could be the key to getting this big one, because I've not seen it out in the open water. But then this rod's just rattled off out the open water, and it's kind of like, do I stay now, do I still go? So I think the plan's going to be, I'm going to get the rod back out on that spot, make the most of a feeding window, then I'm going to feed, have my breakfast, weigh the fish, get that back, and then maybe move around mid-morning. But if I have another bite out here before then maybe I will reconsider the plan. We'll see. Check that bar of gold out. An angry male common. Up a double, I'd say. Put up an incredible fight at the start. It flat rodded me on the bite, and I thought, is this the jewel? But it soon become apparent that it wasn't a 60 pounder on the end. But again, a really nice fish, and hopefully one step closer. Running out of time though, we've got 24 hours left now. I've got to decide whether to move or stay put, but for now, I'm going to get this one back, and I'm going to give the spot another 1 or 2 hours, I think. I'll recast the rod back out there, see whether there's anything else feeding in the zone. Lovely fish, that. Proper red mire common. Go on, mate. Go and tell that fully scaled I'm waiting for him. Just literally had another bite. The sun's right up now, and I'm packing stuff away, ready to move. Oh, my strap's just come undone. A right hand rod on the 60 yard spot, 15.5 wrap spot that we talked about yesterday, where I'd seen that big fish show. It's done nothing all night, all morning. It's now just rattled off with a really hard fighting fish. It's so hard to know what you're playing in here. Like, your legs are going to jelly, like the thought of what it could be. That 60 pound fully scaled popped up. I do not know what my legs would do. Just over the net you go. Brilliant. Fish number 4, second one of the morning. And that is, I think, yeah, that is my biggest fish of the trip so far as well. Happy days. Absolutely nailed. Hook bait's come off, just the cork plug left. That's why I love that hinge stiff rig. That went coming off in a month of Sundays. Right in. Well, in the water, she looked mid to upper 20, but gone 20, just under 22 pound. But I'm not complaining. Another absolutely beautiful common. And as much as I love commons and all the scales that they have on their body, I would like the one that's 3 times bigger than this and not quite a common, a fully scaled mirror. But now I'm getting bites, I'm getting more and more confident. I know the hinges are working well, the bait's working, they obviously like feeding on it. So yeah, I'm running out of time, but there is still time on my side. And I'm going to, over the next hour or two, really contemplate whether I stay put or move down the end and fish in the margins. Really tricky to decide what to do now, but yeah, that's the beauty of fishing. That's why I enjoy it. Keeps the old grey matter going. Lovely Manor common, that. You ready to go, my friend? Go on then. Go on then. Aren't you? Brilliant. When targeting big fish in particular, there's certain types of rigs that I like to use, and they lend themselves really well to this particular venue. Those 2 rigs are the 360 rig and the hinge stiff rig. When I got here on Tuesday, I spent quite a lot of time watching the water and waiting before I picked a swim. I eventually picked a swim and set about leading around with the marker rod, trying to find some spots. I found a plateau that I knew about because Mozza had caught the big one in March from that area, and that felt very clean and hard when I was leading about. So I went in with two 360 rigs on that spot. The 360 rig, like I say, it's a real favourite of mine. I've had fish in Europe over £65 on the 360 and over £62 in the UK on the 360, so I have total confidence in it for big fish fishing. Now, when I reeled in on the Wednesday morning on that particular spot, both rigs came in with green slimy weed all over the hook point and around the lead clip, and that could have been picked up when I retrieved the rig as it dragged along the bottom, but something in my head was telling me that I needed to swap and that there was a bit of chod and stuff on the spot, and that the presentation maybe wasn't perfect with the 360. So what I did was changed over yesterday to the hinge stiff rig on that spot. I'd caught a fish in the morning on a different spot on the hinge stiff rig. It was nailed, and so I then decided to do all 3 rods on the hinge. This again is one of my all-time favourite big fish rigs. It's a big pop-up rig that sits up there proud in the face of the big carp, and a big fish, when it's got a big belly and a lot of bulk to move around, it's really hard for it to tilt up and feed on a bottom bait, whereas the hinge is sitting there perfect at that right height for it to suck it in. With this rig in the UK, I've caught 2 or 3 different fish over £50 on it, and again, just have total confidence for big fish fishing. The boom section on the hinge really does vary depending on the lake bed that I'm fishing. So if there's a lot of weed on the lake bed, then I'll be using a long boom made from the Camotex Soft, because it's nice and supple and it will sit over the weed. If there's a really light dusting of weed, then what I'll do is use the Camotex Semi-Stiff and a shorter length of it. So it's got more rigidity and it's not going to kick up in the weed. And a shorter hook link, I'm sure, gives you a better chance of converting a pickup into a bite, because your hook's going to come into contact with the bottom lip quicker. I'll only go with a longer boom if, like I say, there's a lot of weed around and I want a guaranteed presentation. So the hook section of my hinge stiff rig is a ready tied edges chod rig. Some people might say it's lazy, not tying your own chod rigs, but these sections are tied to absolute perfection, and I cannot actually tie that whipping knot for the D better than that. So I use the ready tied ones. Again, I've had fish over £50 on these ready tied rigs. I have total confidence in them. The hook size is a size 4, big hook, but again, I'm fishing for big fish. If you look at the size of the mouth on this £60 I'm trying to catch on this session, that hook is tiny compared to that fish's mouth. So that's the rig. Hook bait, I've been using the white Northern Specials and the washed out pink Northern Specials. Again, the Northern Special is my go-to hook bait of choice when trying to catch big fish and, you know, fish of any size really. It's a really super attractive hook bait, really buoyant. I drill it out and cork it so I can get consistent buoyancy. That can stay out there for a couple of days if needed, and it's not going to sink. And yeah, that combination over the years has absolutely worked wonders for me. So I swapped over to the hinge on that spot, and it was away this morning with that lovely upper double that you saw me with earlier. And again, it was nailed. And I've also had another fish today on the hinge on a silty spot, which has got a light covering of weed on it as well. So yeah, that's the rigs. Both of them have been fished on the lead clip presentation with some camo tubing. You're fishing for the lead to drop every time, ideally. There's a lot of weed out here. And again, when you're fishing for £60 carp, the last thing you want to do is lose the fish because your lead didn't eject, it got snarled up in a weed bed, and then the hook pulls or something like that. So, you know, I know leads aren't cheap, but for a couple of quid to guarantee a 60-pounder on the bank, I think everybody would pay the £2. So lead clip setup's always my go-to setup when I'm big fish fishing. Made the call, biting the bullet. It's about 1 o'clock now. The sun is beating down, it must be 20 degrees. And I've decided I am going to fish down the other end in a swim called the Gate. the wind has turned round. It's been blowing north-northeast all the while I've been here. It's now starting to trickle down. I think it's southerly into this this bay and onto that bank. And like I said before, there's fish out there, but I'm going to fish away from the bulk and fish some margin spots and some different areas in a different part of the lake for the final night, and hope that I can hunt that fully out. So I'm going to get all the rods wound in, chuck it on the barra, get round, find some new spots, hopefully have the rods in by the next 1 or 2 hours, and then have the whole evening period undisturbed, and hopefully the fish have it. The last 2 nights I've been doing my rods in the evening period, and the fish have been showing whilst I've been doing my rods, and I feel like there's a bite to be had in the early evening. So I'm going to get the rods done a lot earlier today and sit on my hands this evening to hopefully get a bite in that period as well. So we'll see, we'll try. So I'm now in the gate swim, and it looks really nice. There's a new wind blowing coming from my right across to the left, and yeah, it feels really good for it. I'm going to fish 2 rods in the main gate swim. I think I'm going to fish my right hand rod. There's a big overhanging tree. It's got form for having done the big fully before. It's recently done the little fully, so I'm going to definitely put a rod there. And then I'm going to find a spot between 15 and 20 yards range out in front, because I've seen fish showing that sort of area quite consistently since I've been here, but mainly in the evenings and hearing them at night. And then my final rod, I haven't fully decided yet. It's either going to be a single stick in a little gap to my left, or a single stick to a little gap to my right. And again, close in. I'm not planning on going any further than 20, 25 yards maximum on this bank. I think from what I've seen, the fish like to patrol close in on this side. So that's going to be the start, and we'll see how we get on. We're into the final evening now here on the Manor, and I feel really settled into this gate swim. I've only had the rods out about an hour and a half, but there's fish about. We've seen the odd ones show, and there's fish cruising just under the surface on the same lines as where I've got some rods. So I'm hoping as it cools down this evening that there's going to be a chance before we leave in the morning. I ended up going with the 2 rods in the main swim. The right hand rod is tucked under the marginal bush, as I said, and then my left hand rod I found a really nice hard spot. 7 wraps out. It's quite a bit to the left of the swim, but 7 wraps out. It cracks down, so I've got a rod on that, and then I've found another spot that's 4 wraps out, just in a little gap up to my left, and again I've got a rod on that. All 3 rods are fishing over the same boilie mix that I've been using all the while that I've been on this session, and that's the live system and the new test bait from CC Moore mixed, with a big dose of rock salt as well. I always, when I'm trying to target these big carp, boilies and salt in the spring, it's a combination that just works so well. And yeah, so I've resisted the temptation to use anything like worms or casters, pellets or sweet corn. It's been the out-and-out boilie approach, and whilst I have had some smaller fish, I still believe my best chance of that big one is that boilie approach. The rod under the bush, I've switched that rig back to a 360 because it's very clean under the tree, nice and hard, so I wanted the bait much closer to the deck. And then the other 2 rods I've got on hinges. In all honesty, I could probably fish 360s on all the rods because they are cracking down fairly hard. But I know there is intermittent weeding in and around the spots. So just got that, you know, security factor with the hinge. And again, it's a big fish rig, and I just have so much confidence. I've had 4 bites on it since I've been here, landed all 4. All the hook holds have been great. So yeah, it's looking really promising. We've got loads of cloud coming now for the afternoon evening period. I've got the rods out and sorted way earlier than I have been doing the last couple of nights, so I can just kick back now, get some dinner sorted, and I hope the next time I get to speak to you is because I'm telling you about a big 60-pound fully scaled called the Lord.
Well, good morning. Just eating my breakfast, and then we're going to film a morning update where I was going to give you the news that it'd been a quiet night with no action, even though the fish had shown, and I just didn't know what was going on. But then out of nowhere, the margin rod has just busted off. The rod nearly went in. I've got a really angry fish on. It's just getting stuck in a bit of weed, but yeah, this is literally the last chance saloon. We've got to be off the lake in about an hour and a half, 2 hours. In you go. Yes.
Going between 3 and 4. Final morning and my biggest fish of the trip at just over 23 pound. Another immaculate common from the Manor. And I know I keep saying it that, you know, I'm here to try and catch that big 60-pound fully. You got to smell the roses along the way, and I certainly don't mind catching fish like this whilst in pursuit of the largest. It's been a great trip. And yeah, if this is the last fish of the trip, then it's a lovely way to finish.